So they say that trust is the heart of every great community. But as communities grow, keeping them safe and inclusive becomes the real challenge. Moderating this session is Twinkle Dhawan, joined by Dani from IBM and Nicole from Higher Logic. Together, they'll all explore how intelligent moderation can help communities stay open, respectful, and resilient, where automation would support people and not replace them. Over to you, Twinkle.
Thank you, Mehak. It's wonderful to be here. It's amazing how much has changed in just a year. Conversations are faster, happening everywhere, and AI is now woven right into how communities connect and grow. Moderation isn't about policing anymore. It's about trust, safety, and brand credibility. Tools are smarter, proactive, and nuanced. And yet, one question still remains: how do we scale integrity without losing empathy? That's the heart of today's discussion, and I'm thrilled to unpack it with two incredible industry leaders. Dani Weinstein, Head of Community at IBM. Dani has led community programs at global brands like HP, SAP, and Domo, with a proven record of driving customer loyalty and measurable business impact through community-led growth. Nicole Saunders, Senior Director of Customer Experience Strategy at Higher Logic. Nicole brings 15 years of experience in customer and community strategy, previously led community at Zendesk, and is recognized for advancing customer-centric programs across fast-growing SaaS environments. Dani and Nicole, welcome.
Thanks so much for having us.
Great to be here.
Great.
Thanks for having us.
Now that we have intros out of the way, let's dive right in. We have observed that communities have multiplied, conversations move across time zones, and context shifts in seconds. Community moderation certainly has come a long way. Wouldn't you agree? Dani and Nicole, how would you describe that evolution and what's driving it today?
Yeah, I think that there's been a lot of shifts in strategy over the years, right? We've seen communities change dramatically as social media has become part of the ecosystem, as that has changed customer expectations. Then it was chatbots coming in and shifting the kinds of engagement. And now, of course, we have AI. And so, we've gone from some of the basics of how to deal with spam and that kind of thing into now trying to identify who are real people and figure out what the balance is of allowing AI generated content versus insisting on, authentic author generated content and everything in between. We've also seen a huge evolution in technologies, with the platforms going from, again, a real basic, keyword spam filter where you're manually entering the words you want it to, filter out, into now where we've got all sorts of sentiment analyses, whitelist, blacklist capabilities, everything in between. I don't know, Dani, what are your thoughts?
No, you set the foundation really well. Again, I think at the end of the day, the role of the moderators and the moderation team, it doesn't change. It's simply the dynamics of the ecosystem have changed. And so the challenge is keeping and maintaining a safe space and enabling authentic conversations, helping people connect to others like them or who they want to connect to, and even find the information that they're looking for. And probably the biggest challenge is really weeding out the noise and the disruptors who are trying to work against that healthy environment and healthy conversation, the healthy ecosystem. And so, as you mentioned, we've gone from the legacy, spam filter days where actually get sticker shock or just viewing that initially out of box of some of the words that were out there to very sophisticated bots and even now AI. And so I think it's a matter of managing and adjusting with the times and the tools and the ecosystem that we're in.
Interesting. I love how both of you have tied evolution to intent, moving from rule enforcement to relationship building. It's a shift that really underlines how moderation has become a strategic function and not a reactive one. Which brings me to our next topic of discussion, the challenges that come with that evolution. So my next question is, what is some of the biggest challenges in community moderation, and what moderation guidelines or policies can be set up to address those?
I mean, I think that in general, one of the biggest challenges is moderation at scale. The reality is, it's very hard in communities to set hard and fast rules. One of the challenges that people are thinking about a lot with AI moderation is how much can you realistically automate and where do you need a human involved? And I was talking with somebody the other day. We were actually debating about inviting partners into a community. And they were talking about like, well, I'm really concerned that the partners are just going to use it to like spam with marketing. And I'm like, well, they might, but that's what your moderators are for, right? You need to set your guidelines. You need to set expectations. You need to enforce those rules on a consistent basis. And I think one of the biggest challenges that I have seen as so many companies have now embraced community, which is wonderful, and those communities have taken off and grown, people are saying, wait, the kind of moderation that works really well, which is a human coming in and saying, hey, you're kind of towing the line of our rules. Here's the guidelines. Here's how we'd like you to interact in the future. You can't do that when you have 100,000 people. And so people are looking at how can we automate things and what can we automate, where you also don't create a hostile environment. I've also seen communities that have been over-moderated, where they enforce the rules too frequently and too strictly to the point that people feel like they can't engage. And so I think it's really finding that right balance of where do AI tools and automation fit in, where do you need a human, and then how do you do all of these things at a bigger scale?
Yeah, those are great points. And again, I think it's keeping authenticity and managing the tone. I mean, examples of some of the things that potentially can assist at scale with with AI and so forth are duplication of content, people asking the same questions over and over again, and having those conversations merged and populated or organized in a single space so that it's easier to find, including we're already doing this in our community with in using AI for federated search, making that a better experience. At the same time, it also enables those people who, as I mentioned earlier, are trying to be disruptors and working against the tone or pushing the limits on the policy. And so that at the end of the day makes it challenging for the moderation team. The other thing too is simply the accuracy of the conversations that are happening, and so ensuring that as people are leveraging AI applications and tools to add to the conversation, ensuring that it's providing it's improving the quality of the content versus degrading it. And so we'll get into that a little bit more, but I think that really goes back to managing and working in a way so that you can ensure that those people that are truly driving value and adding to the value, the authenticity and the tone of the conversation, are being, those voices are being promoted and amplified versus, while at the same time the moderation teams are mitigating and demoting or putting away or putting on the side, the bots and the disruptors of the community.
Interesting. So basically, it's sort of a balance between how a human would handle it and then also about using technology at the same time and sort of building guardrails around it.
Yeah, well, again, fundamentally, community is about connection and particularly the human connection. And so it's we've evolved over time into this community everywhere ecosystem where it's no longer just about an online destination, but it's also augmenting that with the in-person meetups. And so you want to be able to maintain that authentic conversation and connection in the online space. When you start to have non-human attempts at that, that's a disruptor, and so it's very challenging to moderate that. But we're working through that right now.
Fantastic. So I think what stood out to me was what I think both of you are trying to say is that we need to have that sort of balance, and instead of just moderating or managing content, it's also about designing that culture and having that intimate space for people to communicate and interact in the community. We've pretty much actually faced a similar scenario with a couple of our clients here as well, where we help them tackle similar challenges with our tool named Ethic, our AI-powered community platform. So that was pretty much somewhere they struggled as well. Now that with technology becoming even a bigger part of how communities operate, I feel it's natural to ask, what does the future actually look like? So we've heard a lot about AI-driven moderation, and it's no longer theoretical. Communities are already using intelligent systems, as Nicole just mentioned. They're using sentiment detection, context-aware filtering, and even predictive moderation. I'll roll this question over to you, Dani. My next question is, what are some of the initiatives your company has taken, or some examples that you've seen across the industry that show that AI is making moderation even more scalable and effective?
Sure. So, a few things. I mean, first of all, one of the challenges, particularly with AI, is, historically, those people that want to gamify the system and create multiple accounts, it's a lot easier to do that with an AI application to create, multiple accounts and then, gamify or amp up or reward the main account. So, managing that is a bit of a challenge. I think the bigger one goes back to the authenticity of the content, and we're already seeing some newbies coming into our community and leveraging AI generated content to post in the community, and we're having our champions, for example, call us out and say, you know what, this is actually not correct. And so we're actually working through that process to leverage those experts who have that knowledge to help us augment and correct that content, number one. Number two, we're looking at adding a checkbox in our capabilities with our platform provider, Higher Logic, to have people actually voluntarily say this post actually includes AI generated content. So again, it's in order to do that, or the reason behind it is help to drive more of a trusted ecosystem and an environment. And so with that, we're looking at rewarding our champions, for example, to help us do that, and at the same time not reward and gamify people who are actually providing inaccurate content. I think from a use case perspective, there are, I think, a lot of positives that potentially are out there. There's matchmaking capabilities that, if Nicole's coming to the community the first time, we know her profile, and we know that she's works at the ABC company and has this experience and recently posted about this topic. Connecting her to someone like her who would actually add value for each other, having that prompt could be a great thing. There's also sort of another Big Brother's kind of scenario that we've kind of looked at where the AI application can actually crawl the internet to see what that person's expertise are and actually prompt them to share them in the community. So at the end, there's a lot of challenges here, but I think at the end of the day, it's about guiding the ship so that you're helping to extract and drive more value from all your members, have that healthy connections in the community, and ensure that there is that ongoing human connection versus just limited to the AI capabilities.
Nicole, what's your take on this?
Well, our philosophy at Higher Logic is very much that we're trying to develop AI tools that accelerate community managers' capabilities, that reduce friction for community members, but where the heart of community is still always human. And so while we have some wonderful tools like expanded spam filters and recognition of AI content, that kind of thing, and things around sentiment analysis, we're also still making sure that there's always going to be a human in the loop. And I think that that's really critical, especially if you look at some of the policies that are coming out of particularly Europe around how you manage these things. There's a lot of cases where you don't want the technology doing everything or making decisions on different users. But to that end, I do think that a lot of these capabilities are really unlocking the true power of communities. Because of course, the reason that companies want to have a community in the first place is often this idea of, we're going to get all of these customers and they're going to come tell us their hopes and their dreams and their challenges and what questions they're having. And this is going to be such amazing information for the company. And then in practice, what that looks like is one community manager spending 3 hours a day reading every post and comment, maybe putting that into a spreadsheet, probably more just jotting down notes and then pinging people on Slack, right? And saying like, hey, product managers, this is what the community wants. And hey, support teams, some people in the community are saying these things about their support experience. And so a lot of businesses, I think this is why we're constantly discussing that question of like, what is the ROI of community and how do we prove value and how do we get investment? Well, AI and all of the capabilities it's going to have to read and synthesize and understand intent and, do things like sentiment analysis, not just at like the bulk level, but you can now do it for an individual, for a keyword, for a specific thread. So if you're releasing a product, you want to know how people are responding, you can track that. If you have a troubled customer and you want to keep track of how their users in the community are interacting, you can measure that. this is what's really going to unlock the true power of communities for organizations and for members. And so I think these things are really exciting, but the key is always going to be to make sure that you have a human in the loop and that you don't have any of your AI systems set up where they can go rogue and go banning a bunch of users or deleting content. It should always be an approval loop, that kind of thing. I think the question of how much AI content to allow in a community is a really interesting one. Because I think the reason that people are going to want to come to communities in a world where they can get answers to most of their questions via a Google AI summary is going to be to talk to other humans. And so if all of the content is humans generating with ChatGPT, that kind of defeats the purpose. At the same time, it's not always a bad thing, right? If you've got a user who puts in a one-sentence question, ChatGPT can be really helpful in fleshing out what that user's question is. Or if you've got people that want to engage, but your community is not in their first language, the AI translation, we now have systems where you can have two users that speak different languages and they can each read and respond to the same conversation in their own language. That is amazing capability. And so I don't know that we necessarily want to say we don't want any AI generated content. And let's be real, most content is going to be a hybrid of something someone's written in a few sentences from ChatGPT or, a mix thereof. But I think it's something that we're just going to have to evaluate over time. These technologies are evolving so quickly. I think the biggest key is something that Dani mentioned, which is to make sure that you are evaluating your community guidelines and you're being really clear with users on what is and isn't allowed. And those are, they're probably going to evolve a few times over the next couple of years. We're all going to have to see exactly what gets developed and how these things all roll out. But it's an exciting time. It's just also one that we're going to have to pay a lot of attention to.
100%, I agree. So expanding on that, Nicole, you just mentioned that using AI for sentiment analyses on a deeper level. I've seen that AI really is not always accurate. So how should we tackle that?
I mean, Dani, you kind of mentioned that this is something that you're confronted with today of, hey, this user wanted to answer this other user's question. And so they jumped into ChatGPT and found an answer and posted it and it was wrong. There should always be a Q&A motion in your community. The reality is there are wrong answers when people aren't using AI. Just because people are uninformed or they don't know or they have part of an answer. And I actually think that that's a loop that we haven't talked about a lot in community strategy over the years, is how do you QA and evaluate the accuracy of things? And so I think it can fit into a lot of the frameworks that exist today around accepted answers, around moderator review, around users being able to flag something as maybe incorrect. So again, you always got to have the human in the loop. You got to have the processes in place to be able to manage those pieces.
100%.
Yeah, to harp on that again, it goes back to leveraging the experts in the community, whether it be champions, your employees, your partners, to gamify that and have them help augment the conversation so that you do get to the best answer or the accepted solution. At the same time, you want to encourage people to we don't want to stop the use of AI because it's probably not possible. But at the same time, you want to create an environment through the guidelines that we're evolving, so that people use it in a way to actually provide better answers or ask better questions or start more thoughtful conversations, and they can use that to actually get them to that point, as opposed to using it in a, let's say, malicious way to simply just respond to all the answers and get credit for it. So it's definitely a balancing act. I don't think it changes necessarily the dynamics where, again, you're tapping into that, your super users and those top experts to gain that knowledge. And at the end of the day, if you do it right, then those best answers will actually help AI learn better. And it's going to help the overall experience be more authentic and a higher quality.
100%. Interesting. So building on that, what are some of your predictions for how AI will evolve in the next few years? Whoever wants to take it.
Well, I'd love, the point that, Nicole had talked about earlier. Again, I remember years ago almost getting thrown out of the first lithium conference where, Phil Stuff was on stage and I was asking too many questions. But even back in 2009, I said, the company that allows members to ask and answer a question in the language of their choice, So why would you have localization in 30 instances? You should have one community with all the content in the same space. Well, we're getting close to that with the AI tools. I mean, even traveling out internationally and using Google Translate or even the applications on your phone, it's analogous to that. And even back in the day when I was at Domo, we had a Japanese super fan who we ultimately hired, and I thought he was fluent in English because he was posting in both English and Japanese in our community. And when I met him, he didn't know a word of English. And we were actually talking through Google Translate on our Macs, having a real conversation between English and Japanese. So I think that will actually bridge the gap and bring people closer together and allow for the conversations to all happen in the same space. That's certainly one thing I'm excited about. Beyond that, I think there's just the plethora of these use cases around, as I mentioned earlier, the matchmaking and the prompting and driving efficiencies on consolidating all the questions that are out there into knowledge-based articles or a superset. If they're asking about the same kind of things, that can actually improve the lives of the community managers and the moderation team.
Yeah, I echo a lot of Dani's comments, and it's funny because typically you ask us like how we see this evolving, and it's so hard to imagine because most of these capabilities already exist, right? Like what Dani was just talking about, translation, that's already a capability, that's already a thing. These technologies are evolving so fast, it's really hard to predict where they're going. But I do think what we're going to see is just a lot more AI sort of woven into a lot of the things we already do. We've been talking today about translation and about keyword moderation and spam filters and things like that. One use case we haven't mentioned is the role that it's having on federated search. And federated search has been a thing for a long time. But in most cases, what it looks like is somebody types in something in a search bar and it says, okay, here's 2 blog posts and 1 knowledge-based article and a video and a community post. Go click around and see. Well, now AI can read across all of those and summarize, which is a really amazing capability. And oftentimes those things didn't include the community, and now it's much easier to loop that in. So I think that we're going to see people getting answers to questions a lot more quickly. I think what it's going to force is an evolution of what the role of communities are. Most brand and B2B core communities have been started around this support use case. And I think in the future, that support use case is going to get handled by AI, whether it's on your site or on Google. And that doesn't mean that people aren't still going to want to connect with humans, but that's where you've heard Dani mention matchmaking a couple times, because I think it really is going to be about how do we get people connected with the other users that have the knowledge that they want, that have the experiences that they want, who can give them those real world firsthand examples and recommendations and that kind of thing. So I think you're going to see that. I think we're going to see a lot more leaning into virtual events and chapter type programs. That's something that we're definitely focused on at Higher Logic, how we can really empower users to connect with each other more in a synchronous fashion, as well as having the asynchronous forum. So I think we're looking at that. I think on the whole, businesses are just going to understand a lot more about their customers. The other thing is there's been a trend in customer experience for a long time around users saying, hey, I'm cool with sharing my data with the company, but my expectation is that you're using it for good, i.e. when I call support, don't ask me who I am and what product I'm using. You should know that about me, right? And I think that that's going to accelerate with AI, because now we don't just have the information from some Salesforce fields or some tags. We can actually see how people are interacting on the internet and understand what some of their challenges and things are. And so I think that customers are going to have a very, very high expectation of a business having knowledge of them, of things being personalized. And, because AI will allow us to do that, they're going to want us and expect us to do that. And so the big challenge for a lot of businesses is just going to be keeping up with those expectations as it moves so quickly. I also think that it's going to see a lot more proliferation of content that comes out in different formats and serves different learning styles, which is great in a lot of ways, right? It creates a lot of accessibility, but some people learn best by reading, some learn best by doing, some learn best by watching a video, some people prefer a podcast. And now you're going to be able to get that information all of those ways in whatever language you want in real time.
100%. So I think what you're trying to say is that personalized community experiences are going to be big in the coming few years. And that is what people are expecting. And I see that happening too. So it's clear moderation is evolving from a safeguard to an intelligent framework powered by AI. Let's see if we have some time to take up a few questions from the audience. So there's one question. How do you balance automation and human empathy, especially when AI can't always read tone and intent perfectly? Whoever wants to take it.
So, again, I think there's no really clear-cut answer. I think there's sort of a block of things that are clearly falling through the automation bucket that are more on the back end, less customer-facing. But as you start to peel back the onions and look at the where does it interact with the customer and that relationship and that tone, I think you need to ensure that you maintain that level of, as much as you can, that level of authenticity on human connection. So it's really not clear cut, but I think there's definitely a portfolio of things that can certainly be automated to improve the efficiencies of the work that the team is doing, as well as driving a better experience. At the same time, it all comes down to how do you continue to take actions that are going to reinforce and strengthen that relation, that connection with the members of the community.
And I'm going to sound like a broken record, but I'm just going to keep saying, you got to have some humans in the loop. You got to make sure that you've have some of that awareness, and you don't set up your agents. I think if you have a fully automated community management, you no longer have a community. You have a public support channel run by a bot. And so we're always going to have to keep the human engagement piece in there to be aware of all of that.
So
and something that Nicole had harped on earlier, I think, again, another capability, which is it's here today, and I think it'll get better, is kind of especially as data shared, is the geolocation element where, it can tie into those local and regional events, and as well as the virtual ones. Because again, it's an augmentation of the online, purely digital, as well as how do you strengthen and combine it with, events, because that's also going to help strengthen the human connection.
Interesting. So basically, it's about human plus AI, and then we're going to extract VOC insights from it, sort of giving it a bigger goal and tying it to intent. Tough goal, but I think we can pull it off.
I think we'll all be surprised at how easy it actually becomes with all of these tools.
100%. So that was incredible. Thank you both for those insights. I feel this is absolute gold. There was so many nuggets of wisdom in there. Thank you, Dani. Thank you, Nicole, for those incredible insights on blending empathy with technology and trust to create safer and more sustainable communities. And to everyone watching, remember, intelligent moderation isn't about replacing people, it's about empowering them.
Definitely, I agree, Twinkle, and I'm sure that was a much needed conversation. I really liked how Dani mentioned that moderation is more around trust building and not the rule enforcement. Such a healthy perspective. Great. As we now move into the final panel of the night, let's flow into this last conversation on the platform perspective, shaping smarter communities.